Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. I thought I'd take a look at a racing game for the Sega Saturn that many gamers around the world waited for, but sadly never received, as it never saw a release outside of Japan. Today we're taking a look back at Gale Racer for the Sega Saturn. For those of you that were hanging around arcades back in 1991, you'll best know this title under its original name, Rad Mobile. It was a fast and furious racer that did very well in the arcade. It was vintage Sega. The premise was that as the driver, you must race your rivals from the west to east coast of America. The arcade version boasted high-res graphics and a great sense of speed, and it even had a keychain of Sonic. As a fun fact, this is the first time that the Sonic character appeared in any official Sega game, making this the debut of one of the company's best-loved mascots. By this point in time, Alex Kidd had failed to appeal to the newer generation of gamer. Sega had always had form of bringing their arcade successes into the home. Just think Golden Axe, Altered Beast, Outrun, Space Harrier, Afterburner, and the list goes on. The snag though was that these all belonged to the golden era of 16-bit gaming for Sega. A game like Rad Mobile was far too resource hungry for the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis. The Sega CD really couldn't handle polygons well, and the 32X was a dying platform even upon release. This meant that the home edition of Rad Mobile would have to wait until the true 32-bit generation. As such, Gale Racer was born. Now in 1994, many gamers had moved on. Between the PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn, you could already pick up a decent range of fast racers that were specifically built for the systems. As such, Gale Racer became a game that saw its release limited to Japan. After all, why push Gale Racer when the superior Sega Rally juggernaut was on its way? From the start, Gale Racer feels like a bit of a mashup of styles. The opening sequence is really excellent. It's got the rock music, fast cars, and decent landscapes. So, how about the in-game action? Well, this is where I think that everyone is going to have to agree to disagree. On the surface, almost everything we loved about the arcade version is in here. There are a few elements taken away, but if you haven't played the original, you really would never know. What's here works really well, because the game was rebuilt from the ground up, so really this is more of a remake than a direct arcade port. If I had to give you a soundbite as to what the game is like to play, think Outrun, but on steroids. Everything is bigger and faster, but not necessarily to everyone's taste. A common criticism is that much of the play area is taken up by either the front of the car, the timer, the area and rank, and even Sonic himself. To be honest, none of this bothered my playthroughs at all. It was intended to be like this by design, so I'll go with it. In general, if you aren't a fan of cockpit view racers, Gale Racer won't do much to change your mind. The second elements we have to talk about are the graphical tweaks to the game necessary to make Gale Racer viable to run on the Sega Saturn in the first place. The original arcade Rad Mobile was what you could call a true polygonal racer. Each car and other elements were essentially made out of wireframes and skinned with graphics. Gale Racer on the other hand uses a much more 2D solution to create its 3D effect. Almost everything you see going on here is a standard sprite. A 2D image either moved or animated to give the impression of depth. Essentially, this is absolutely no different to the techniques you see in games like Outrun or Space Harrier. The most noticeable use of this effect is on the road. Right from the off, you'll be questioning if this was the right technique for a racing game. The road is essentially several layers of sprites stacked behind each other. As you move towards them, each layer is then scaled to give the impression of moving forward. Now, this is a completely legitimate way of achieving the effect, and used widely in gaming. The issue with Gale Racer though, is that the sprites are reasonably chunky, so if you're turning a corner, you get to see how the effect is created. In turn, the gamer is left to see what looks like a very bumpy surface. After a while, this just becomes normal. But when you first play the game, it does make you question if there was a better way of achieving this effect. This method technically led to the second issue, which is perhaps more of an issue for the gamer, and that's the draw distance. With driving games, it's useful to be able to see where you're going in the distance. Gale Racer naturally sits you low in the cockpit, automatically reducing the viewing distance. However, the number of layered sprites used to create the road, which all need to be scaled, led to limitations on how much depth could be realistically achieved. I believe that the game designers did balance the depth versus processing power issue. Somehow, I just can't help but feel that other 32-bit games achieve this a little bit better though. There is a lot of racing goodness in Gale Racer as well though. Small touches, such as having to switch on your headlights or wiper blades, give this game the original feel of the arcade. On top of this, the rain effects are simple yet very effective, and the night stages also seem to punch well above their weight in places. So graphically, you're going to have to make your own mind up. I go back and forth on this one, but I can say that I still enjoy playing this one. The actual racing is reasonably average. The car is a little twitchy, and the super fast acceleration will require some getting used to. You'll want to go full throttle, but you will be punished on some of the tighter corners. The game has appearances from the police, rivals to overtake, and some really diverse scenery. Some really great looking, others a little bland. The overall impression though is of a decent racer with its own style. Personally, I felt that the game never outstayed its welcome. The levels are short and fast, and if it's a quick hit of action you're after, then Gale Racer gets the job done. Once you've made your way from Los Angeles to New York, and taken down your rival, you'll be treated to a ridiculously long end sequence of the Statue of Liberty. The developers really wanted to get their value for money out of that wireframe. As Gale Racer never did see the light of day outside of Japan, you will have to import this one. As with many Japanese Sega Saturn titles, you will only have a CD case-size physical copy, but the full colour manual and CD make this a really solid package. Pricing for Gale Racer is very unstable. I picked up my copy for just a few British pounds in a bulk shipment. In the UK, up to and around £10 is about right. For the US audience, up to around $15 is reasonable, but I dare say that you could pick this one up for as little as $5 on a good day. For those that dig a little deeper into the game, you'll find some unlockables and a long-standing mystery. For some time, gamers have argued over which hidden Easter eggs are in the Sega Saturn edition of the game. As you play through the game, you'll be rewarded with Sonic keychains at the end of each stage, depending on your performance. Once you collect 100 mascots, your Sonic keychain will turn into Tails. I can confirm that this is 100% true, and the unlock level is 100 mascots. I've also seen other sources where the gamer has unlocked Knuckles. My assumption is that this is at 200 mascots. However, the mystery comes from which other characters are in the game to unlock. To try and get an answer, I delved into the CD to see if there were any clues and try and get a definitive answer. I found something quite interesting. If you arrange the files by name, you can clearly see a .bin file labelled Sonic and Super SO, which we can assume means Supersonic. It stands to reason that if these two files are similar in size, which they are, then they are likely to be the binary files for the in-game mascots. So, just for fun, I sorted the files by size and found a very interesting result. There were several files around the 2 kilobyte size, but 12 in particular stood out as binary files. Most of them had reasonably easy to decipher Sonic characters as names. The files are as follows: Eggman, which must be Eggman, or Dr. Robotnik if you like; Emmy, which I assume is Amy; Flicky from Flicky's Island and earlier Flicky; Knuckles, which obviously must be Knuckles; Mighty, which I'm assuming is Mighty the Armadillo; Metal Sonic, which is obviously Metal Sonic; Sonic, Supersonic, and Tails. Now these all seem like a pretty good match for the Sonic universe as it stood in 1994. There are 2 other files in here called Mecha S01 and Mecha S02. Now these may not be Sonic characters. I had assumed that these were an abbreviation for Mecha Sonic, or Metal Sonic's alternative title in Japan. To be honest, I'm not 100% certain. My feeling is that if you've gone to the extent of already having a character called Metal Sonic, why would you create 2 more files called Mecha? However, for fans of the Wonder Boy series, you may be familiar with the Mecha Dragon boss. I'm not 100% certain, but it's a theory worth investigating. After all, with a clearly abbreviated Metal SO to Metal Sonic, it makes logical sense that this is in fact another Sega character. Or it could be that these are simply not characters at all. These binary files relate to some other element of the game completely. Mecha is a clear abbreviation of mechanical in Japanese, so this could simply refer to either the dashboard, the stage, or even the rearview mirror. The other named file is Lee. At present I'm not aware of what this character would be. Perhaps some of the hardcore Sonic fans could enlighten me on this one. Remember though that this game was published in 1994, so many of the new generation characters didn't exist at this time. All of these characters may or may not be in the game. We'll only know for sure if someone out there takes the time to earn all of the mascots. Will we ever know for sure? Well, so far I've not seen all of the unlockables, but the internet is a wonderful thing, so I'm sure that someone will pop up in the comments at some point with the definitive answer on all this. So, the mystery of the mascots aside, is Gale Racer a game that you should still be playing? Gale Racer is one of those games that isn't outstanding, but fans of the original will feel the need to at least try out its home console version. Although Gale Racer definitely has its quirks and graphical limitations, I do feel that it was worth Sega's time in developing this one. Far inferior racing games to Gale Racer were released on the Sega Saturn outside of Japan, so it's a shame that we never got to see this one. The music throughout really lifts the game. It's that classic rock and electric guitar combination that makes this game feel so 90s. The good news is that you can put this one in your CD player for a somewhat short but exciting soundtrack. I highly suggest checking out the Flushing Beat track. It just screams 90s racing game montage. Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!